Well, we're live here on Political Stew, and this has to do. Welcome to the show, and it's our very first since we came back online. And today, there's no better time for us to talk about some developing issues across the continent. And for those following that historic visit of King Philip to the DRC, there's been a whole lot of talk about that particular visit to a place where his ancestors once held sway. And Sulaiman led, and today I'm being joined by an African who is also a global affairs analyst and someone who's also a politician in Belgium, Colins Nweke. Colins Nweke, good to have you, and thanks for your time for being with us today.
Always my pleasure to be with you, Sulai. Thank you for having me.
So now let's try to make sense of this visit, which journalists and historians have termed a historic visit. Why is this a historic visit?
Well, for several reasons. As a matter of fact, it is also been considered a journey of decolonization. Now, that is actually an aspiration in the sense that it is expected that this visit of King Philippe of the Belgians will actually create the necessary impetus to actually mark a new chapter in the relationship between Belgium and Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, it just didn't happen. I mean, there has been a build-up in the sense that 2020, I believe it was, when Democratic Republic of Congo actually attained, they reached 60 years, they had their 60 years anniversary of independence from Belgium. And so the king sees that as an opportunity to actually send out a message of deep regrets to the people of Congo, actually expressing the sentiments that his ancestors under King Leopold II did some very, very nasty things, committed serious atrocities against the Congolese. And so he expressed that regret, and that had been long overdue. No king before him, ever did that. So he did that, and that was the beginning of this journey that he has finally made today. And he repeated in that journey. I mean, as a matter of fact, yesterday he actually repeated the wordings of the regrets that he sent out in 2020. So that is the context.
Yeah. Collins, let me come in here because I'm happy you've used that word more than once, talking about deep regrets. And that is what Congolese I spoke to earlier are not happy about. They think that he should have been categorical in his condemnation, in his apology of what his forebears did to the Congolese.
Well, yes, I think he was categorical enough in the condemnation of the atrocities committed. He actually dropped some figures, referring to the fact that over 10 million Congolese died as a direct consequence of the atrocities committed by his great grand uncle. Now, there is a difference, of course, between expression of regret and tendering of outright apology. Now, I think it's just a matter of terminology, but also technicalities. Because when you tender an apology, it does have a different set of consequences and effects than when it is an expression of regrets. For example, an apology would have meant that they will begin to deal with issues of reparation, financial compensations, and all of that. And don't forget that we are talking of atrocities that were committed between 1885 or something like that till about 1908. And then thereafter, then there was this Congo Free State, and then the colonization, and of course, it all continued, until independence, and even a little after independence. So you see, the question then becomes, where do you draw the line if you have to go into the issues of reparation, financial compensation, and all of that, which would be the outcome of an apology? So I think it's for those technicalities that the decision was made for him to express deep regrets. But you see, the wordings wouldn't have been different if it was called an apology or if it remains the deep apology that
and let me jump in here, and I think it's one of the things that perhaps would have been able to work better if they had approached some Africans like yourself. I think that for the average African, he still thinks that that word, expression of regret, is not the same as being sorry.
Yes, I agree with you, and you made a very, very vital point, actually, sounding as if you actually live here, because, there is this sentiment that neither the royals nor the government of Belgium is actually consulting sufficiently with the Congolese diaspora that are here in Belgium. Because you see, there is also a cultural element to the issues that we're dealing with here. And words do matter, especially, in the context that we are talking about for Africans. Now, it may very well be that with sufficient consultation, they would have found that all that the Congolese care about has nothing to do with financial, compensation, but the restoration of their dignity by simply using the word, this is a clear apology. Now, these are things that could be negotiated beforehand so that, that technicality, they don't fall into it. Now, I'm not naive enough to, just accept that the Congolese are going to accept it that way. But, I mean, if you don't ask, you don't know. Now, as of today, the atrocities of, years back, they may not be happening, but there are everyday things that actually remind the Congolese and the African diaspora living here in Belgium of those atrocities, even though they are no longer happening. Now, there are issues of discrimination, there are issues of racism, paternalistic, behavior towards Africans. And I will just cite one single example, and that of all across Belgium, the status of King Leopold, the murderer, is everywhere. And so, the simple request for the statue of Patrice Lumumba, the revered human rights activist and the first elected prime minister of Congo, to adorn a street or a street to be named after Patrice Lumumba, that has not happened. For all sorts of excuses, they kept blocking it. And that could have been something symbolical that tells the Congolese and the African community that, yes, you matter. Yes, we are ready to put the past behind us, but that is not happening. So one will expect that the king's visit, creating that necessary impetus, will then open the dialogue for such conversations to begin to happen, but also for those gestures, a street named after Patrice Lumumba, a statue here and there, standing side by side Leopold to compensate, for the bad memories that it brings them. Those are little gestures that they have to consider, and one can only hope that it will start after this visit.
Where do you hope President Felix Tshisekedi got it all wrong? Yeah, quite a young, vibrant African leader, and many have also said he has been commended just the way he's been, criticized for not being audacious enough to let King Philip know that, look, as Africans, words mean a lot to us here, and the way structure may mean to you in your part of Europe is not the same way we Africans, even though we are Francophone Africans. An African is an African, irrespective of what he or she speaks at the moment. So, how can this be remedied? Because the criticism is loud in the DRC at the moment.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I should add my voice to that criticism because, as a matter of fact, that you tell the King of Belgium the gospel truth that mirrors the sentiment amongst your people is not disrespectful, and it is not compelling the king to do anything, but rather you are opening up the reality to the king, and by doing that, inadvertently, you are also appeasing your people. So, on the political side of it, President Felix Tshisekedi has, done very, very badly. On the side of diplomacy, some might say, okay, he was diplomatic, but it depends on who is actually interpreting, what he has done. So all in all, I think he should have done better. And I do not believe that, the king would have taken it badly, or that the Belgians, would have taken it as, a disrespect to their king or to their people. So yes, I agree with that.
Let's also talk about some of the key things he did when he got there. Talking about looted artifacts, just a few number, we're actually giving back to the Congolese on this historic visit.
Yeah, he did. That was a very significant gesture. Now, what it tells us is that when a legislation was passed giving legal backing to the return of stolen artifacts from Congo, that it was not just going to stop at a piece of legislation, but that was a very significant stop, a very significant milestone. Now, the king actually taking one of such artifacts and returning it, simply reaffirms the readiness and the seriousness of Belgium to actually, do what has to be done. Now, a growing number of, European, Western countries are actually agreeing. They are accepting that the time has now come to return stolen African artifacts. But there are still a number of hesitating countries, chief of which is the United Kingdom. Now, with the gesture of the king, by returning it, taking the step to return it, he is simply saying, yes, we are a small country. At the time that we held sway, we were one of the smallest African countries, but the damage that we did as a country was very, very significant. However, we have taken this step, and it shows that we want to start walking a new path. By hesitating, you are on your own. This is clearly what that gesture symbolizes, and one can only expect that the British politicians will have a more robust debate about this and fall in line.
And quickly here, if we go back from how we started, the intention of King Philip could be commendable. But the reception and the attitude of this particular visit at a time when Congolese are actually looking at a very battered economy. They say the timing is also pretty wrong. So, for some other Africans like yourself, specifically the Congolese who are in Belgium at this point in time, what role do you think they can play in having proper mediation and proper closure to these atrocities?
The Congolese diaspora in Belgium, and I would say by extension in Europe, they should be given the opportunity to play the role of bridge builders. Bridge builders in terms of quite a sizable number of them actually became adults in Europe. As a matter of fact, some of them are now on the second and third generation. But their heart remains in Africa. That culture is part of them. They grew up with it, they ate it, they breathed it, as children, and then growing up as adults. A good number of them have gone back to visit. Some of them still maintain very, very strong, links with the Congo. Now, what that means is that they are also part of this Belgian society. So they understand the mentality of the people, and so they are standing with 2 feet on both countries. But then it's got to be done correctly. Correctly in the sense that, like I mentioned earlier, there are quite a number of things happening here that reminds them of the atrocities of the past and creates doubt in them that Belgium is actually ready to turn a new, chapter rather than just lip service. I have given a number of examples, e.g., naming a street after Patrice Lumumba and other pro-independence, icons. As we speak, the remains of Patrice Lumumba by way of a tooth that was, plucked out of him before his body was actually, demolished more or less because, it was, acid was poured on it, so it decayed. But one of the police officers that actually took part in the murder took one of the teeth as a souvenir. It has been discovered there is still a whole lot of rigmarole about returning that tooth back to Congo. So these are bits and pieces of gestures that they need to do to actually pacify the Congo and create the Congolese, especially the Congolese diaspora, and create the strong impression that they are ready to turn a new leaf. But more importantly, that is above all of this, dialogue is important, because if you don't ask the Congolese what reconciliation means to you, what pacification means to you, return of restoration of your dignity, purification, if you don't ask them what it means to them, you can only be running around with all sorts of misrepresentation, with all sorts of meaning that may not mean anything to them. So dialogue is also key.
Now, when we talk about dialogue and misrepresentation, how can that be done? How can the Belgian authority or the monarchy reach out to the true representatives of the Congolese people and have this dialogue and get closure?
I must admit that one significant thing that has happened is that the equivalent of truth reconciliation that South Africa had, of course, at a lower scale, is actually ongoing. So a commission has been set up to look into the things that happened at the time. Now, I am not quite privy to the workings of the committee, even though A friend of mine and colleague here at the constituency, Walter the Friend, chairs the committee. I mean, we allow them do what they have to do. But I must say that if it wasn't in their plan, if it is not in their plan to actually conduct, needs analysis and invite as many Congolese diaspora as possible to the committee to give testimonies, but also to hear them out, I believe, that should be done. So far, I am not certain that it has been done in the manner that the Congolese expect. That's number one. Number two, there is also the Congolese, community, a very robust, active community here, helping to drive the economy, social, political, also cultural affairs. They are everywhere. I think some of them are in the academia. So there is a need to actually involve them actively. Now, it wouldn't have surprised anybody, and because I think it's a very important gesture, if a Congolese was actually chairing that committee. That would have meant a lot. But that didn't happen. But that doesn't mean that everything has to stop at that. They could still turn things around by, involving them more going forward.
And Collins, I know personally, speaking about you, you're quite big in amongst the African community in Belgium, even Nigerians. Let us in here if you have any idea if there are Congolese on the entourage of King Philip to the DRC.
Well, maybe on the sidelines, or very invisible, part of the entourage, because the big names we know, and I must say that the entourage was very well composed in terms of the prime minister, who is the head of the political head of the country, is on the entourage next to the head of state, which is the king. Of course, the Congolese, there are quite a number of them that are active politically. So if they needed to involve them, if they wanted to involve them politically, it would have been a fantastic thing to, take one of them. But to be honest with you, I am not aware that any of them is a key player, a key member of the entourage, or at least the press, for whatever reason, has not been able to project that, if that is the case. So on the basis of what I know, I can tell you that, that is not the case, and that is a major oversight.
Now let's try winding down on this conversation, which I know we'll also revisit quickly here. Talking about politics and Africans' involvement in politics outside Africa, especially around Europe. How involved are Belgian Congolese, in the politics of Belgium? And this is very important because if we're talking about having closure to what we have just been discussing, then there must be some Belgian Congolese that will be way, up there, influential, politically speaking, to have this one-on-one conversation, perhaps, with the monarchy or the government of Belgium.
Congolese involvement in Belgian politics is a contemporary phenomenon. It hasn't always been there, and so there are a few of them dotted here and there. Now, let me give you an example with my constituency of West Flanders. When I first stood for elective office in 2006, and eventually, got elected, I made history as the first non-Belgian born person to be elected to political office. Now, the history of migration between Congo and Belgium is much, much older, decades older than, Nigerian migration and settlement in Belgium. Yet, it happened as it did. Now, that tells, the narrative that the Congolese, haven't been quite engaged politically. And there is a reason for that. And the reason is that I believe the country wasn't receptive enough, to them in terms of, political engagement. And probably there is that lack of forcefulness on their part to be involved, because politics, I mean, nothing falls on your lap. You got to go for it. But the environment has got to be right. But I believe that it is now being realized, and the second, third, and even fourth generation of Congolese here are actually cut off a different wood. They are making quite some significant inroads in industry, in government establishments, and to some degree in politics as well. But the conclusion is that it could be better.
And one last one here before I let you go, and it has to do with happenings in Nigeria, which I know you share a great affinity being a Nigerian. Looking at preparations towards the coming elections in Nigeria, are you satisfied with the outcome of primaries across political parties?
Certainly not. And honestly speaking, Sly, there has not been anyone that I have spoken to, particularly the non-state actors, that has shown any iota of satisfaction with what has gone on. Number one, the role of money in this, politics, particularly the primaries, is disgusting. Number two, we have seen the high level of manipulation, sometimes outright violations of existing laws, and nobody seemed to care. And so, in terms of content, I do not know, out of the two the people that have emerged from the two traditional old political parties in Nigeria, none of the two people that have emerged so far have actually managed to talk about what they want to do when they become president. It has all been about personalities and so on and so forth. So no, there is nothing satisfactory about what has happened so far. Now, the only hope is that the rest of the opposition groups might be able, one way or the other, to actually form some sort of coalition to actually give the two old political parties a good run for their money. It is only when that happens that Nigerians can actually exercise or express some hope that 2023 will mean something politically for the country in terms of rebate.
But Colins Nweke, I'd like to thank you for your time.
Always a pleasure. Thank you very much for having me, Sly.
I'm Sulaiman. Thank you for watching.